What's going on, Pacer Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice Pacers. Well, guys, a lot's been going on in Indiana Pacer world with the Indiana Pacers, unfortunately, not winning the NBA Finals, Tyrese Haliburton tearing his Achilles, and then Miles Turner leaving in free agency for the Milwaukee Bucks. So we try to keep up with it, but it's definitely been tough. I know, Derek, you and I have kind of had a little bit of a crazy couple weeks here in terms of our own life. We haven't even really been able to do much for the Colts end of things either, but the Indiana Pacers do make a move here to help at that center position. According to multiple different people, the Indiana Pacers are trading with the Memphis Grizzlies for center Jay Huff for a second-round pick and a second-round pick swap here on Saturday. So a little bit about Huff. He turns 27 here in August. And Derek, really so far, especially last year with Memphis, more of just kind of a role guy. Last year didn't play a ton, but was pretty efficient in his time with the Memphis Grizzlies. Only played a little bit under 12 minutes per game. So it was kind of a role guy. But in that time, he definitely did some good stuff. As a stretch five, he shot 40% from three. And here's an interesting fact about Huff as well. He was just one of 3 7-footers to shoot 40% three-pointers while taking at least 200 attempts. The other two, Karl Anthony Towns and Kristaps Porzingis, and also was 24th in field goal percentage, allowed on layups and dunks last season among 90 players to contest at least 300 shots. So just a couple different things there in regards to Huff. So really has been a guy that hasn't had a big role with the team so far in his career, but has an opportunity here with the departure of Miles Turner to potentially come in and compete for a spot. Seems like he's a guy that is very similar in terms of skill set to Turner. He's a guy that can shoot the basketball and can do a lot of things, that you're looking for. Obviously, he doesn't have the pedigree that Miles Turner does, but could be kind of a potential stopgap sort of solution here. A guy that's going to go in there, compete with guys like Isaiah Jackson and some others for that starting center position. So what were your thoughts here on seeing the Indiana Pacers' first move here in free agency, or really at all, after they lost Miles Turner here? What are your thoughts on Jay Huff and just what the Pacers did in this trade?
Yeah, the Miles Turner news just kind of blew up the Pacer world, and after that happened, everyone was like, "Well, what is going to happen here? What are the Indiana Pacers going to do when it comes to the rest of these guys?" And unfortunately, the Pacers, they had a number with Miles Turner. They even had a number for DeAndre Ayton. And ultimately, none of those numbers worked for either one of those guys because, you have a guy on your bench, Cody, who you're probably going to have to pay here very shortly too in, Benedict Mathurin, right? If you don't pay him, he's going to go at some point. And, he will definitely have a hot market, but you want to keep him around because he's definitely a scorer that you need. So, you weren't willing to shy away from the number that you were going to give Miles. And now you get Jay Huff, and it definitely is an interesting signing. One thing about it is there's just not a whole lot to go off of with Jay Huff because, this last season, the most usage he got out of any season so far was drafted in 2021 for the Lakers. Only played in 4 games. Didn't do anything else there. And then, the next season went to Washington. Only played in 7 games. Didn't do much of anything there. Denver, he played 20 games. And, again, tried to find some momentum, but the way they utilized him, he was only getting 2.5 minutes a game, so he wasn't doing anything there. This last season was the first time that you got to see Jay Huff actually have any sort of significant time at all, and albeit he only played on average of 12 minutes a game, he did play in 64 games and started in 2 of the games. And then you finally saw he was averaging 7 points, was shooting over 40% from 3-point range. So this does feel just kind of like a stopgap player that's very similar to Miles, a little bit bigger than Miles Turner was. not nearly the shot blocker that Miles is, but definitely a guy that can still shoot from behind the 3-point line given the opportunity to, which, again, that's what the Pacers want, right? You're not going to go out and get a center that is going to just dominate the middle of the paint. That's not the way that the Pacers run their offense. So you want a guy that is tall and can play defense against centers, but also somebody that is capable of shooting beyond the arc if you ask them to. So this definitely is interesting because, just because you sign Jay Huff does not 100% mean that he will be the starter come day one next season for the Indiana Pacers. There will definitely be some other options there. We saw that the Pacers a lot of times would unorthodoxly put, like Obi Toppin or Isaiah Jackson or some other guys on the center for other teams just because that was how they needed to do it defensively, and they were still able to keep their offense intact. So it's ultimately going to come down to how Jay Huff actually does with the attempts that he gets. And it definitely is a great thing to see that in his first season where he played in the majority of the games and started in a couple that, he isn't a big scorer, but he is efficient in the amount of field goals that he does take. So you look at it and if you're thinking, okay, if Jay Huff can play 20 some minutes during our games and, can still shoot 50% and shoot high 30s from 3-point range, being able to have that as a center option for you can really come in handy.
For sure. And this is definitely a low risk, potentially high reward sort of thing here because, Jay Huff got a little bit later on, in his, I guess, basketball career when he actually is starting to get some more roles, right? He's turning 27. But the good thing here, Derek, and we've seen the Pacers do this with guys like Obi Toppin, for example, where they trade a late round pick and they get a guy that fits well into their system and thrives, right? So could that be a potential thing? And the good thing about Jay Huff is, Derek, he's cheap and he's under contract for the next 3 years. So you have him around as a guy that at the worst can be a bench role player for you. But, potentially if he gets more of an extended look here, who knows? If the efficiency stays put, he could become a pretty darn good center in this league, right? So, yeah, I think it's definitely a low risk, potentially high reward sort of thing. I mean, if it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul. At the end of the day, it's a second round pick. Like, a lot of times, you'll trade those and take risks on guys like that. So for me, I like that. I think this could potentially be a guy. And obviously the Pacers are very particular with the guys they bring in that they feel like can fit their system, right? So
yeah,
I feel like this is potentially a move that we look back on and we say the Pacers got Jay Huff for what? Excuse me? Like we did with Obi Toppin, right? Because Pacers have done that. They found, we watch how they've built their team. They've had multiple guys who have either been second round picks themselves or have been traded for second round picks. And that's kind of how they've built this roster overall, especially some of the bench guys. So could Jay Huff be that? And, another opportunity here. And at the very worst, the second round pick, and he's a role guy. He comes in, he plays a couple minutes. He plays, let's say, 11, 12 minutes per game like he did. Oh, okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. But I do like taking these risks on guys like this, where if it doesn't pan out, you're not hamstringed to anything because it's $3 million per year for Jay Huff over the next 3 years. Like, you're going to take that, right? For even if he's a bench guy, that's totally, totally fine. But he has a chance here to compete, right, with Isaiah Jackson, depending what you do with James Wiseman and, whoever else, Thomas Bryant as well. Like, we'll see. Tony Bradley's another name. So there's going to be a lot of guys potentially competing for some playing time here. And you just bring another guy in here to compete. And whoever the best player is, if it's Jay Huff, if it's somebody else, you at least know you've done your work to try to figure out, with what a lot of people would say is kind of a wash this next year with Tyrese out likely for the most of the season. You get more of a potential long-term answer on what you have at center or don't have.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Regardless of the role of a J Huff, that it just being able to get any kind of help from him definitely will help you. But it definitely is a surprise, and it'll be very interesting to see just what comes of this because again, Miles Turner, he had his struggles in the playoffs at times, specifically in the finals. I mean, Miles was a complete liability for a good chunk of the final series, at least from the offensive perspective. Don't know what happened there, but it definitely is a concern because you need to replace a guy that was averaging 17 points a game and was getting you 5 or 6 rebounds a game, right? I mean, ultimately, he wasn't a big rebounder, so we already knew that about him. But if Jay Huff can potentially be that starter and get you even relatively similar numbers, then you're right. This becomes a situation where like you said, it's low risk, high reward, and but I'm still definitely curious on how the Pacers will still go from here. I wonder if this is just a stopgap or if there's anything else. I don't really think there is many other moves that they can make for the center at this point.
Right. It's nice to see them bring somebody else in at least to compete and just kind of take it from here. I mean, like I said, like without Tyrese likely for the majority, if not all of the season next year, you do kind of wonder, like, is this a year to kind of, I don't know if I'd say rebuild, but kind of retool a little bit, right? Is this kind of an opportunity? And is Jay Huff a guy you just give a chance? And if it works out, great. If not, you kind of figure that out next off season. I don't know, but right now the Pacers are kind of in this weird spot, right? Where you just came off one game away from winning the NBA Finals. You lose two of your key starters, likely for the 2026 season. I know at least one and probably two. And you just got to figure it out what's going to happen next. They're in just this weird position, but I do think they have enough talent to be a playoff team this next year. But we'll have to see it when it comes to center, right? Because unfortunately, Miles played himself out of a bigger deal, right? With the Pacers, at least. Obviously, we saw what he signed with the Bucks, and that's just what it was. And it just sucks because you do wonder, like, if a couple things went differently, if Tyrese doesn't get hurt, I mean, this could be a completely different situation. But you take it as you go, man. And this next season is going to be kind of interesting to see how do the Pacers weather it because they do have a lot of talent still on their roster. And you bring Jay Huff in, a guy that's been a role guy so far, and potentially gets another open, opportunity here to even get more minutes, and we'll just have to see.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be fun to see what they do the rest of the way.
Absolutely. I do like the fact that he plays similar to Miles, but he's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than Miles, right? Not going to say he's going to be Miles, but he's got some of those tendencies, right? He can shoot the basketball. He can do some things that you like, and kind of how the Pacers system, set up Miles well the last couple of years with Rick Carlisle. So we'll see how Jay Huff kind of plays it out. If he's a bench guy, so be it. If he challenges for a starting spot, that'll be great too. But guys, let us know your thoughts here on the newest Indiana Pacer, Jay Huff here, the newest player and the newest member of the Indiana Pacers, got traded today from the Memphis Grizzlies. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you guys so much. Let us know your thoughts on him. That'll do it for this one. Thanks, guys, and go Pacers.